This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Hey, this is Brian Peña. I always join the Vito podcast, the best podcast in the United States.
And welcome to the latest and the freshest edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. I am your host, Vito Chirco, alongside my broadcast partner in fun. That is the Doc from Doc and Jock, John Charles Macaroon. John, how's it going for you?
Vito, a beautiful day outside to record. Funny story, around noon, I was just strolling into the office to start an 8-hour day, busy schedule at the practice, couple podcast recordings going on this fine day, and the power went out in the studio, and I'm like, oh my goodness gracious, it's the first time the power has gone out in 3 years, and I'm like, oh boy, this would be a fun thing to try and execute, trying to record a couple podcasts with the power out. We do have the gear to record a podcast manually, but thank goodness, we do take for granted sometimes that we are able to have electricity, that we got this fine studio to record our project and to have this fun. So to be able to sit here today, knock on wood, so far so good.
So that's a good thing to hear. Now, Thanksgiving, was it fun for you and something that you got a lot out of, seeing your family?
Watching the Lions is always a struggle. Obviously, you want your football team to win and compete, and it's always a struggle watching the Detroit Lions compete and perform at peak optimal functioning, and with the head coach, Jim Caldwell. But with the family, it was very enjoyable, good food, good fun, a lot of laughs, a couple glasses of wine here and there, and it was just nice for me a couple days to just let loose and unwind. I didn't work Thursday or Friday, and as a guy that works 6-7 days a week sometimes, just taking a weekend off, basically, a Thursday and a Friday was so nice.
So It was very rewarding, too.
It's made me a better podcaster, made me a better producer, entertainer, and I'm ready to talk some baseball. And the reason why I wanted to talk about the state of baseball was, obviously, people at the end of seasons will kind of rate how the season ended, how the regular season played out, how the postseason played out. And one of the first complaints that people have is baseball growing at the level that it should based upon, modern advancements? I mean, the game is really a game in which a lot of old-timers say, don't tinker with it. A lot of people have this strong reverence for the past and the traditions and things like that. But when you just start to look at some of the advancements that were made, adding the wild card, kind of doing some things in terms of entertainment value, trying to, upgrade all these stadiums, some of the old-time stadiums, including Tiger Stadium, have gone by the wayside. Modern advancements have taken place at some of the old-time ballparks in order to make it more fan-friendly and a little bit more entertainment. But the one thing that I do think baseball has to look at is the television broadcast product has to improve, Vito. I mean, when we watched the Detroit Tigers this year, the first complaint that I had was the average length of Tigers games was damn near 3 hours. And as a Tigers fan, we talked about it. I tweeted about it quite a bit on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. And I just said, it is hard. I mean, I'm a fanatic. I'm crazy. So if a baseball game's on that involves the Tigers, I'm watching it because obviously doing the podcast and being a huge sports fanatic in town, I will sit and watch it. But when you say to me, can my nephew sit and watch 3 hours of baseball? The answer is no, it's too long. And what did we revere during the season when games were like 2 hours, when they went by fast? I mean, there were a couple games where the Tigers started a game at 7 o'clock and ended by 9:15. There has to be a way, and you can agree or disagree with me, there has to be a way to shorten the length of baseball games, because if you don't, these youngsters, these millennials, older people, they can't sit and watch 3.5 hour baseball games night in and night out. It has to be looked at in terms of probably the first thing on my mind in terms of improving the quality of baseball.
Well, it's also because the new age sports fan in general doesn't have the same attention span as my dad and your dad and older individuals have, like 50 and above, and you're not part of that crowd of people yet, Doc. Good for you. And I'm not even close to it. And I would say as a millennial, as I know I would be categorized as, it is too long of a game, but what are you going to do to eliminate the length or to shorten the length when you know there's so many bullpen arms used in every single game from game to game over a long-ass season, 162 games in totality, which makes it a marathon of a season. So, you know what? It's never going to be the quickest game out there, but you have to realize that there are so many integral elements and so many intricacies of baseball that you have to come to appreciate. And if you do, I think you'll see that game in, game out, baseball can be more interesting than it leads on to be. And that's where I think the fans, modern day baseball fans and sports fans that are, in their 20s and maybe younger than that, have to realize that there are a lot of elements to baseball, to Major League Baseball games that should make it interesting for you, the consumer at home or at the ballpark.
Okay, Vito, did you feel like the Tigers games were too long this year?
Well, especially when they're losing as much as they were. Now, even if they were winning, if they won 90 games this year, made the playoffs, still you could argue that the games are too darn long and consistently too darn long. The thing is to shorten the length of the games. It's going to take so much effort, and it's not completely possible. So it's kind of where you just have to accept the fact that these games are long-ass games. And you have to just, once again, come to realize and appreciate baseball for what it is. A sport that has many, many factors, right? A myriad of factors tied into it, such as bullpen arms being used, and too many at times. And that's where maybe, Doc, where teams could adjust. But the thing is, in modern-day Major League Baseball, what really has come to life the most? It is the usage of these bullpen arms in small spots for a batter or two, and then your whole entire bullpen is utilized in a single game, and that's why these games have become so darn long.
One of the first things that we can look at, and one of my pet peeves, is when batters step in and out of the batter's box. One of the things that irritates me so much is it's sometimes used as gamesmanship in regards to trying to psych out a pitcher, or a pitcher stalls and waits there trying to psych out a batter that they're trying to intimidate. One of the first things you can do is saying, look, you're only allowed to step out of the batter's box once. Do you know, Vito, there are some major league players that literally have a routine in which they step out after every couple pitches, redo their gloves, look back at the pitcher, and there's nothing more infuriating or frustrating than stalling tactics. And pitchers do it, batters do it. I think one simple rule you could change is, once you step in the batter's box, you can step out once per at-bat, and that's it. 2, the other factor that is being talked about and has been implemented in some minor league baseball parks is the clock on a pitcher. Some pitchers are so notoriously slow that they can't get off a pitch, once every maybe 40 seconds. If they limit it to once every 15 seconds or once every 20 seconds, you now speed up the pace of play. And the third thing that's being talked about, and one that, the first two I agree with, that you can make some changes in terms of the pace of play between the pitcher and the batter in the batter's box. The one that's being talked about, and there's some debate, is whether or not to take a step to limit how many pitching changes you can make in a certain inning. And I kind of disagree with that, because that's kind of changing the flow of the game. I feel like you might have situations where, let's say you're at a limit, okay? Because I'm looking at the drawbacks right now. Let's say your limit's like two pitching changes per inning. Because obviously when a pitcher is removed from a game, there's a delay and there's a stop in the action to let the new incoming pitcher warm up. Some people will say that, okay, if you do, set a limit, okay? Let's say somebody's struggling, a la a Kyle Ryan or a Blaine Hardy or a Shane Green. And you notice I'm talking about a lot of Tigers relievers here, but let's just say that the Tigers bullpen tends to struggle and you're at your limit, okay? And it's nobody out. You cannot replace the guy, all right? And he gets batted around. There are some innings that are huge. You got 9 batters coming to the plate. He gets nobody out. You go through 2 more batters, a couple more hits, home runs. You might see a situation where you limit the number of bullpen changes. You might see a pitcher give up damn near 15 runs, and it would be embarrassing. It would be very frustrating. I'm totally against changing that part of it, but I do agree with the first two that I discussed.
Guess what, Doc? If the batters batted around in a single half inning, guess what would happen? The games would lengthen even more, so it would defeat the purpose of limiting the arms that you can utilize in one single half inning. So I don't like that idea, and also it it takes away from the strategy involved for managers and how they utilize their pitching staffs, because managers are paid big money for a reason, because of how many factors you have to incorporate into a single game, your lineup construction, your managing of your pitching staff, when to insert somebody, when to take out somebody, because you hear these managers be criticized for so darn often for taking out a pitcher, one batter too early, for stuff of that sort. And the thing is, it would take away from that aspect of a Major League Baseball game, the managerial aspect and strategy of it. So I would not like that being incorporated. I don't think it will ever be implemented, because think about it. Would the 30 Major League Baseball clubs even vote on that in approval of that being a rule that is enforced? I don't think so whatsoever, Doc.
So you're not in favor of any of those changes? Or
Well, I'm not in favor of the one where they would limit the amount of pitchers used per half inning. But you could cut down on the time that a batter can step out of the box and readjust his gloves left and right, like Nomar Garcia-Parra. Do you remember that when he was a member of the Boston Red Sox during his Major League career, would step out so darn often to adjust his gloves? Really? What's the need for that? There was no need for that. That was a habit, a tick of him, of his personality, his way of doing things at the plate, and it wasn't necessary. So you have guys stepping out of the box way too often, and that's why you see these pitchers, and I think rightfully so, quick pitching batters at times. And I would do it if I was a pitcher. I would quick pitch them, because if you're not ready, that's your fault. And the umpire, there should be a reallocation of time that umpires give to batters in terms of it should be shortened. The amount of time that you get to step out of the box, it really should be, because that will cut down on the time of games. And I think that will be a worthy cause, something that baseball should pursue, and in the very near future, Doc.
Okay, any thought that you've given to improving Major League Baseball, the viewing experience, shortening the game? How do we make this game better, Vito?
Well, I would say you incorporate something where you can overrule plays based on instant replay. Instant replay's already been enforced, but maybe having it implemented for even more calls, more plays throughout a game. And I think that would help out. Now with the speed of the game, okay, it would still be a long game and too long for many viewers, but then you would get all the calls right. Because what really, in the NFL, especially in professional sports leagues, these umpires and officials and refs are constantly criticized for getting calls wrong. Well, let's get the call right? That's a way to improve the game of baseball and to improve the game of football, of hockey, of basketball. So I am all for enforcing instant replay, even on more calls, so we get these calls right all the time, Doc.
Vito, I kind of disagree with that. What did we complain about as Tigers fans in terms of these replays? There was supposed to be a certain limit in terms of time, like maybe a minute and a half or a minute, but these things would go on. And one factor that was extending the game was these managers had time to replay it in their booths or in their communication systems, and that would take a couple minutes. Then they'd have a couple minutes to go out there to challenge it, and it just seemed like it needed to be streamlined, and you got to set, firm limits. You got 30 seconds to decide. The replay takes 45 seconds, and at most, 90 seconds of real time should be just, you hit the button, and it should kind of be streamlined and done a lot faster. Damn, it's 2017, about to be 2018. I do think that the thing that we debated, and one that we can revisit too, is the notion of, do we need umpires? Should baseball, now that we've discussed it and thought about it a little bit further and let some time pass, should baseball look to automate and not let umpires call balls and strikes? Because there are scenarios in which these umpires make big mistakes. There's a Fox track. HBO's Real Sports did a feature in which they looked at how accurate these machines can be. And once they get your strike zone, each player prior to a season can get their personalized strike zone with these automated systems. Once he enters the ballpark, almost damn near 99% accurate with balls and strikes. And the umpire can still be there. It's just he's using a UFB. It's just he's using an automated system in an earpiece to get the information. And so it would just be told to him, ball or strike. And he could still be the figure piece. He could still be there, just not making the calls with his eyes.
Do you think the MLBPA, the Major League Baseball Players Association, would be in favor of such a move? I know the umpires wouldn't. How about the players themselves? Because, yes, more calls would be right at the plate in terms of strikes and balls. But do you really want an automated system all the time? Isn't there something in favor of the human element or a reason to be in favor of the human element? I think you need the umpires there. And you said you wouldn't get rid of the umpires completely.
Wasn't it Angel Hernandez, Ian Kinsler?
Who's been criticized? Yes, Ian Kinsler and him had a feud.
There are known umpires who are terrible.
Get rid of those umpires or limit what they can do in a Major League Baseball game when they are umpiring. Don't eliminate umpires completely. And you weren't for that. You're not saying that yourself. But wouldn't using a USB to confirm calls like strikes and balls? You're saying to confirm strikes and balls? Are you saying that, by the way?
No,
that they would have that to confirm?
HBO Sports, if you want to go look, go to HBO.com, and they did a feature in which here's how it goes. The system is automated. There's a person that's assigned to seeing the balls and strikes. They're up in a booth, okay? The umpire can be on the field, and they showed it in a minor league system and they implemented it. And what the umpire does is he's got an earpiece in, and the pitch comes, the dude sees it, gets it within instantly when the ball hits the glove. He knows, he wires it down, ball. Then the umpire calls a ball. If it's a strike, the umpire can do whatever's personal to them. They can flare up their arm or they can call out strike with the fist. It's just the umpire does not make the call. The umpire just delivers the call, which is told to him via the automated platform by a professional in a booth.
So you're taking the call out of their hands.
They don't make any calls.
You're taking their role away. You're going to get less umpires wanting to umpire because you still need somebody there. You need a presence behind home plate because of what? The plays at the plate as well. You need an umpire for that very purpose at least.
That can be replayed, but...
The thing is, though, how about a delay in technology? What if there's a technological mishap at the game, it goes out, and what are you going to do?
You go back to the old way. The umpire calls it. You stop the game.
I think that
both
would happen.
Managers notice that, hey, there's an error in the system. We're going to try to fix it, and then the umpire makes the calls. Because, Vito, the issue is getting it right. And you're not really changing the game all that much in that you have the umpires, delivering the message, but we want the calls semi-right.
All the time right. And that would be, hey, if it's only, by the way, if that's only going to produce semi-accurate answers, balls and strikes that are called the right way 50% of the time, that's not good enough, not nearly good enough. If you're going to use an automated system to deliver balls and strikes to the umpire through an earpiece, it better be right 99.9% of the time, or that's a failed automated system and should be rid of. So if you're going to get rid of the umpires and what they do and their role that they serve in calling balls and strikes, you better have an automated system in place that's going to deliver the accurate and most accurate results on balls and strikes 99.9% of the time. And that would be my concern. And then also, what if the umpire is rebellious and doesn't want to listen to that, what's being told to him in his earpiece? There could be that, and I guess you could just get rid of the umpire, but I still think that's a thing that would never be fully implemented because of the backlash from the umpires. But also, I would say, how about the players once again? The Major League Baseball Players Association. Do you think they would be largely in favor of such a move, or do you think the opposite would be the case, Doc?
Well, I'm thinking more and more that players would agree with this. The Major League Baseball umpires would definitely cause a stir and they'd have a fight on their hands. But more and more, though, Vito, you are seeing public outcries. I mean, you saw a situation in which Ian Kinsler blasted an umpire, and I don't think he got suspended. I think he got a fine, and it really upset the umpires because Major League Baseball knows Angel Hernandez is garbage. He's not a good umpire. He's known across Major League Baseball as an individual that calls things really crookedly, and he's an individual that probably should be removed from his job. So I do think that the players would agree. You would have a fight, but hey, what solves everything? For the interest of the game and for public scrutiny, I do think umpires, if they were told properly and there was a realistic discussion as to what the advantages are, dude, you're doing less work. There's less pressure. An individual could give them a little bit more money, give the umpires more money for the notion of, the privilege of calling games.
So more money for doing less.
More money for doing less, but we get it right. That's the trade-off. You take away their right to actually call the game, but you let them be a figurehead in the ballpark, and you get it right. So
I think you would have to pay them more money then, because you're taking away really what they do best, what they're known for, what they're used to as umpires. They go to school and try to become an umpire to call balls and strikes, so you better pay them more. The thing is, once again, would the MLBPA agree to that?
Yes.
To that move?
Yes, they would.
To the umpires being paid more for doing less?
Sure. They don't care about that. They don't care about that. Baseball is flush with cash. You can figure it out. You can figure out ways to make this happen. I don't see the drawbacks because you're getting it right. I think the number one thing that pisses off players that gets them ejected is arguing balls and strikes. I mean, you could have gotten rid of the players spitting on other players, the whole Alomar situation that's happened, Ian Kinsler blasting umpires. The umpires are under fire, and I think they're starting to recognize it, and they got to find either better ways to call the games, be more consistent. They got to find ways to have more respect for the major league talent that's out there, or they got to submit and let automation come in and let a robot call balls and strikes.
Do you think players would be ejected right away for arguing balls and strikes if there is an automated system implemented?
It's Vito. When you see the report, it's almost flawless. It's right there.
So what if they're arguing balls and strikes?
Why would you?
That?
It's simple.
Well, because you're going to have people that are still stubborn. They don't think that automated system is calling balls and strikes correct. And you know that. Come on.
The manager can just take the player to the corner and say, look, here's
slap him on the butt and tell him, hey, shut your mouth.
Go down to go in the dugout, go down and see the call. It's right there. It's all documented. Every ball and strike can be tracked, and with automation, you can have facts behind it that here was the ball, here's your strike zone, here's what was seen via the video. The ball was right there on the line. It's a strike. And then he learns, and I think you would improve at bats. You would improve major league talent in that they know what it's a strike. These batters are so freaking confused. They don't know what's a strike because night to night, you got some guys that are calling 4 inches off the plate strikes, and then the next night, the same crew, the next umpire is calling like an inch off the plate or not calling it at all.
It can be inconsistent. You're right, and that's not right for the players.
These players are freaking confused, so give them a break. That's one avenue of improving the game, is shortening the length of time, maybe improving the umpires and improving the calls. The other aspect is, and one that's talked about a lot, is when there's a World Series game, dude, you can't be starting past 8 o'clock, 8:30. You can't be starting that late because what are kids doing? They're falling asleep. These kids can't stay up past midnight. They can't stay up, for these extra inning ball games. They got school. I know many people will recall days where they hid under the blanket and hid the radio in their bedrooms and, tried to stay up a little bit late and went to school the next day half tired. But why not, in a weekend game, start the game at 3 o'clock? Let these young kids see the amazing quality of baseball. Let more people see it. And once they see it, I mean, weren't you entranced by the World Series? The quality of play, the back and forth nature, the sheer number of home runs. It was an engaging World Series. These last two have been awesome, but the majority of kids couldn't see it live because the games were going on so long and they took place so late. And that's why Game 1 of the World Series was so talked about, in that the game ended like in 2 hours. It was a quick, fast-paced game. Another aspect in terms of growing the game is you got to be able to let more kids see it, and that means starting the games earlier. If the West Coast, it's 3 o'clock, oh well. Instead of people staying up late and hiding under the covers, they leave work early. So be it. You got to also factor in the Midwest, the East Coast, and looking at realistically letting more kids see some of these amazing baseball games. I mean, I was entranced. I loved the last two World Series. It was really breathtaking and fun to watch.
Well, it's good that you think that way, that you were entranced, that you loved it, that it was breathtaking for you. But guess what Major League Baseball cares about? Advertising dollars, ratings, revenue. And guess what? You moved the games out of prime time, out of 8 o'clock, 8:30 for the start time, and you move them to an earlier start time. And guess what? It kills the ratings, kills the advertising dollars that you can accumulate. So as much as we would like our kids to watch the game of baseball, guess what? They don't care about the kid. And that's sad but true, because guess what baseball lacks as well, which I thought you might bring up, and we've talked about it before, Doc, is advertising and marketing its best players. Its marquee young and middle-aged, old talent, all of its best players. They don't market enough to the young fan at home that maybe would like to start playing baseball or has and doesn't know enough about the game to really be entranced by the sport yet. So I think you have to market your star players more too, the Mike Trouts, the Bryce Harpers, the Manny Machados, Jose Altuves, the George Springers, the Giancarlo Stantons of the world. You have to market those guys. Michael Fulmer, how about him? Market those guys more frequently through more advertisements and through more and more avenues. And if you do that, I think you can get more people, and specifically young fans, entranced into the game and playing the game, Doc. So that's one thing, one step that you could take, but guess what? They're not going to move the start times. They're going to be stubborn, and it comes down to the bottom line. How much money they will make in advertising dollars if they start their game earlier than they are currently starting their games and their World Series or playoff and World Series games specifically on a consistent basis.
All right, Vito, let's take a quick timeout. we'll wrap up the podcast with some quick news and notes regarding our Detroit Tigers.
We'll be right back after this quick commercial break on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. Doc, and as all of you listeners hopefully know, the Detroit Sports Commission is one of our fine sponsors at the DSP network, and since '01, the Detroit Sports Commission has applied its expert touch to marketing and to selling the Metro Detroit area as a marquee destination for regional, national, and international amateur sporting events. And through the Detroit Sports Commission's help, these events have attracted thousands of visitors and pumped millions, and I mean millions of dollars into our local economy. It is why Detroit is now not only the place where champions are made, but also the place where championships are played. To find out more about the Detroit Sports Commission and all of the events they are bringing to our very region, please follow the DSC on Twitter and on Instagram at DET Sports, and make sure to check out their fine website at detroitsports.org. And back here on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company, I'm your host, Vito Geronimo Chirco, alongside the Doc. From Doc and Jock, John Charles Macaroon. And John, we were talking off the air here a little bit about V-Mart and the latest regarding him and whether or not he will return to play for the Tigers in 2018. It is sounding more and more likely now that he will return, and I think much to the dismay of many Tigers fans out there, including myself. What are your thoughts on this news?
The one thing is, do you think that Victor Martinez was an individual that caused problems for Brad Ausmus in that clubhouse in terms of the way he was leading? Do you think he was more of a cancer in the clubhouse?
Yes, and evidence or example A is that brawl with the Yankees when Miguel Cabrera and Gary Sanchez were throwing punches, some big jabs at each other, and guess where V-Mart was? Nowhere near the brawl. And not that you have to engage in the fisticuffs and get yourself hurt, and he's an aging vet who doesn't need another injury at this point in his major league career. But still, it seems like his leadership approach changed. And maybe over this past season, maybe later, or it's been longer than that, but his leadership approach and mentality became more hands-off and not as hands-on, and that was not a positive for the Tigers in 2017 whatsoever, Doc.
Okay, so it's going to be imperative for him to contribute. I mean, what's a realistic expectation for a player of his caliber? I mean, this is a contact hitter, a guy obviously in the past who had obvious power. He was an individual that can drive in runs, but the biggest issue, though, is his speed. How do you use him properly? I mean, he's a DH, but by having him on the roster, do you think that potentially you're hurting the ball club more than you're helping because of the fact that he's basically now going to be a glorified singles hitter? I mean, it's going to take a lot, especially at Comerica, for him to even run out a double. I mean, I don't see him getting faster. I just kind of see an individual that's going to really be making a lot of money. I don't think his contribution is going to be on par with what he's making.
Well, you know what? He won't even be coming close to living up to the bill because he's irrelevant. He's a bench player at best. He should not be starting every day as a designated hitter because he doesn't produce extra base power, doesn't hit home runs any longer. He's a glorified Maglio Ordonez, who remember became Singlio towards the end of his Tigers tenure, towards the end of his Major League Baseball career. And you really want that starting every single day when you're not even as good as what Maglio became when he became Singlio? Remember, Maglio was Singlio. V-Mart's going to be the second coming of it and a much worse version of that. And Tigers fans were irate about Maglio becoming that and V-Mart becoming that at this point in his career when he's already taken a step towards irrelevance and really huge steps towards irrelevance as a major league hitter. Well, you don't need that, Doc, at all in your everyday starting lineup. And he should be relegated to bench duties at this point.
Martinez, who turns 39 next month, he underwent cardiac ablation surgery in September after 2 occurrences of an irregular heartbeat. So that's a little bit scary, too, in that we could be watching him on the field. He exerts himself a little bit, and, God forbid something happens to him on the field. It might be disastrous for him and his family, but I hope that he makes it. But in terms of his talent on the baseball diamond, it's kind of a contract that the Tigers probably look at privately and say, I wish we could have gotten out from under it because I don't see realistic expectations that he can really produce at the level where we need him. I don't think he's going to be, I think the best that we can hope for, Vito, is semi-productive.
I would say 10 home runs, 75 RBIs, 270, 275, maybe 265. So not stellar numbers from V. Martin. His last year with the Tigers will be definitely his last year in a Tigers uniform. I believe his last year as a major leaguer, and it really should be at this point, dealing with heart issues. Those issues, they're staggering, right? And they're nagging. They're not going away anytime soon. And realistically, behind closed doors, I really strongly believe, Doc, that the Tigers wish he would just retire. They don't want him back because he's not good for the club at this point. What is he going to be good for, Doc, in 2018? To provide a little bit of moral support, a single here and there, maybe a double, maybe a bomb here and there. But how frequently can he produce those kind of big numbers and run-producing numbers anymore? I say it's not great. The chances of him doing so is just not very high that he, once again, is a productive major league hitter and specifically, Doc, a middle-of-the-order run producer. I don't think you're going to get that out of VMart in 2018.
Thanks, Vito. Crushing all our hopes and dreams, huh?
More and more negativity out of me. That's all I spew here on Tigers Talk on a weekly basis, I guess.
But I do feel like if he were to cause some problems, maybe Ron Gardenhire can handle it a lot better. He can diffuse the situation instead of maybe how Brad Ausmus handled it and let it linger. Well,
Brad Ausmus was a great skipper. We all love him and adore him, and we wish he was back. Not really.
Out with the old, in with the new. The Tigers' loss is the LA Angels of Anaheim's gain. Good for them.
Yeah, good.
Were you surprised at all he took that job?
You know what? I thought he might take a year off from baseball, so a little bit surprised because of that, but he's a California dude, right? He was with the San Diego Padres before he joined the Tigers as their skipper. So it makes sense. I believe he's closer to home that way, can spend more time with his family. I just thought that he would spend this upcoming season completely away from baseball.
I thought so too, but in terms of the fact that you could get paid as a consultant, I mean, what's he really doing? He's just going to show up in meetings and be like, okay, this is what I think. He'll add his 2 cents and they'll cut him a check. So it's a great gig, one that we all should probably try to
get.
Consulting is a fabulous gig. For those that have done it, they come back and report that. Basically, you just are part of meetings. You give counsel to the general manager. You give your 2 cents, and many people do respect the wisdom of Brad Ausmus. Or I would also take somebody's opinion who I don't respect and go, what do you think of him? You think he's a good player? If Brad Ausmus is like, yes, I value him, I'm going, okay, Brad, thank you for that insight. Brad likes him. Dude, Vito, I don't like him. Get this player away from me. You know what I mean? I'd also use it as a cautionary tale. If Brad Ausmus likes this player, I don't think we're going to go in that direction. We're going to go somewhere else.
You should do the opposite. Brad Ausmus likes that player. Now, really quick, I think what Brad will add, his best attribute, will be his handsomeness.
Okay.
He will flash his strong looks, his rock-hard abs, and get the attention of the masses in every single meeting that he's a part of as a special advisor, a consultant to the LA Angels of Anaheim, Doc.
No doubt about it. All right, Vito, great podcast. Enjoyed the recording. I thought there might be some issues in terms of figuring out what kind of topics to talk about, but so far so good. I'm liking the off-season chat, the hot stove conversations, looking at the state of baseball and the Tigers, so I think this is going to work out just fine.
Pretty quality, high quality, I would argue, off-the-cuff banter from you and I. Always enjoy chatting with you and hearing from you guys out there that listen to each week's episode of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. Please do so even more frequently, and you can follow me at Vito Jerome on Twitter and the Detroit Sports Podcast Network on Twitter at Detroit Podcast for all the latest news and all of our opinions about the Tigers and everything Detroit and Michigan sports related. Adios from me.